The first faint blush of dawn seeped into the vast, silent canvas of the steppe, painting the eastern horizon with whispers of rose and amber. Within the cluster of dark shapes that was the sleeping caravan, a stir began, as gentle as the turning of an ancient page. The air, crisp and keenly cool from the desert night, held the faint, earthy scent of damp felt and the deep, warm breath of resting camels. A sentinel, wrapped in thick wool against a lingering chill, moved with a quiet dignity, his footsteps barely disturbing the gritty earth. One by one, figures emerged from the low, sheltering tents, their movements deliberate, unhurried. For those of faith, a moment was given to the nascent light, a silent devotion offered to the direction of the rising sun, or the distant holy lands, a quiet grounding before the day's relentless call. The world felt pause, held in a fragile balance between night's deep repose and day's grand awakening. The beasts, the true heart of the caravan, were the first priority. Low, guttural rumblings rose from the kneeling camels as their drivers, with practiced hands, checked their sinewy legs, ran palms over shaggy flanks, and ensured their readiness for the journey ahead. The air around them began to thicken with the scent of their unique warmth and the subtle, sharp tang of their droppings. A few hardy tufts of dried desert grass, hoarded from the previous day, were offered, munched with soft, rhythmic grind. Breakfast was a simple, sustaining ritual. Hardened flatbreads, carried in leather pouches, were broken by hand, their dry, earthy fragrance mingling with the sharp, sweet notes of dried apricots or figs. Cold, preserved mutton, salted and cured, offered its robust, savory promise. Hot tea, brewed over embers that had smoldering through the night, was poured into small, unglazed cups, its steam unfurling the cool air, a comforting warmth against chilled hands. Low murmurs, a mix of Persian and the clipped, sturdy tones of the Turkic tongues, accompanied the quiet eating. Each bite was sustenance, a silent pact with the long miles. As the sun's rim finally crowned the horizon, casting long, lean shadows across the awakening landscape, the camp began its methodical dissolution. Tents, woven from hardy wool and felt, were expertly collapsed, their poles disassembled with soft thuds. Personal gear, bedding rolls, small chests, tools, was bundled and secured. The camels, with deep groans and sighs, knelt once more, their patience remarkable as the heavy loads of silk, spices, ceramics, and metalware were hoisted onto their humpbacks. The packing was an art, ensuring balance and stability, a precise dance of ropes and knots. The rhythmic clang of their brass bells, now attached to their saddles, began to punctuate the morning air, a soft, percussive announcement of imminent departure. Then the slow, organic formation of the line. The guides, seasoned by countless journeys, took the lead, their eyes scanning the subtle undulations of the terrain. One by one, the camels rose, their massive forms swaying slightly under their burdens. The caravan began to move, a living ribbon unspooling across the vastness. The wind, now stirring, carried the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke from the extinguished fires, mingling with the pervasive dust. The morning stretched, long and unbroken. The sun climbed higher, casting the landscape in a stark, golden glow. The pace was steady, a deliberate, ground-eating rhythm. Conversations hushed, absorbed by the immensity of the desert, or conducted in low, almost inaudible tones. The predominant sounds were the rhythmic thud of hooves on the dry earth, the incessant jingle of camel bells, and the sighing of the wind as it swept across the open spaces. The air grew warmer, the sun's embrace tightening, but the loose-fitting tunics of linen or felt and the ever-present head coverings provided a measured protection against its growing intensity. By late morning, with the sun a blazing orb nearing its zenith, a midday halt was called. In the open desert, there were no grand structures, only the subtle promise of a dip in terrain or the thin shadow cast by a cluster of gnarled bushes. Tarps were swiftly unfurled and erected, creating pockets of precious shade. The animals, with grunts of relief, were unburdened, their loads carefully set aside. Water, drawn sparingly from ceramic jars, was offered to them, a life-giving trickle in the parched world. For the humans, this was the time for the main meal, more substantial than breakfast. It might include boiled grains if water was plentiful, rehydrated dried vegetables, and moored preserved meats. The food, though simple, was deeply satisfying, nourishing bodies that knew the demands of the road. Quiet chatter filled the air, a gentle hum of shared fatigue and camaraderie. Hands moved deftly, mending a tear in a tunic, patching a worn leather strap, or simply preparing for the long stretch of afternoon travel that awaited. The world outside the small circles of shade shimmered, a silent, sun-baked testament to the journey's quiet endurance. The quality of the light, then, remained. It did not fade so much as deepen, shifting its hue by the faintest measure, imperceptible if one were not truly still, truly watching. It was a kind of light that seemed to hold its breath, casting long, soft shadows that stretched without urgency across the floorboards, across the muted fabric of an old chair. Dust motes, usually invisible, now caught in the golden shafts, danced with slow, almost reverent grace, each tiny speck a universe unto itself, suspended in the quiet air. There was no wind to speak of, only the slightest, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, a gentle current that barely stirred the sheer curtain at the window, a whisper of movement that served only to underscore the profound stillness. This was a quiet that resonated not just in the absence of sound, but in the very fabric of the moment. It was a stillness that settled deep within, calming the restless hum of the mind, inviting one to simply be. The world outside, with its ceaseless demands and hurried pace, felt wonderfully distant, a faint echo that could not penetrate the gentle sanctuary of this space. Here, time itself seemed to unfurl at a different rhythm, not measured by ticks or tocks, but by the slow, deliberate turning of the earth, the gradual arc of the sun, the almost imperceptible opening of a blossom. A warmth lingered on the skin, a lingering memory of sunbeams that had recently graced the surface, or perhaps an internal glow rising from a place of deep contentment. The scent of old wood, of dust motes warmed by sunlight, and a faint, sweet aroma that might have been dried lavender or the ghost of forgotten books, wove together into a subtle perfume of peace. To breathe it in was to inhale tranquility, to let go of any tension held in the shoulders, any furrow in the brow. There was a faint sound, perhaps, from somewhere far off, the distant, almost musical chime of a bell or the soft coo of a dove from the eaves. It was not an intrusion, but an embellishment, a gentle note added to prevailing silence, like a single, perfectly placed brushstroke on a canvas of calm. These small, fleeting sounds did not break the quiet. Rather, they defined it, giving it shape and depth, much like the gentle swell of a quiet sea. One could simply exist within this gentle current, allowing thoughts to drift like clouds across a boundless sky, unhurried, unexamined. There was no need to grasp at them, no urgency to categorize or analyze. They simply were, passing through the vast openness of the mind, leaving behind only the faintest trace of their journey. This was a state of being where clarity emerged not from focused effort, but from quiet surrender, a gentle unfolding of understanding that felt more received than sought. The world, in this moment, felt tender and benign. The edges of things softened, colors seemed richer, and every detail, no matter how small, carried a quiet significance. The pattern on a cup, the grain of wood on a table, the way light caught on a pane of glass, each became a small marvel, observed without judgment or expectation. It was a profound simplicity, a quiet celebration of presence that asked for nothing and offered everything. This gentle continuation, this quiet unfolding, felt like a breath held and slowly released, leaving behind only the pure, uncomplicated essence of the now. The pale luminescence that had settled over the quiet space continued its gentle descent, softening the edges of the world. It was not the abrupt arrival of dusk, nor the sharp clarity of dawn, but a lingering in-between, a protracted exhale of the day's most insistent demands. Each leaf on a nearby oak, once a distinct emerald silhouette against the fading brilliance, now began to blur into a collective murmur of darker greens, absorbing the last vestiges of scattered light. The air itself seemed to grow denser, not with weight, but with a quiet, breathable hush that settled into the very fabric of one's being. A faint, earthy scent began to drift on an almost imperceptible current of air, a whisper of damp soil and awakening roots, mingled with something sweetly ephemeral, perhaps the last breath of fading bloom. It was a fragrance that did not announce itself with urgency, but rather unfolded slowly, inviting a deeper inhale, a more deliberate recognition of its subtle complexity. The coolness that had been mere suggestion moments ago now cradled the skin with a soft, persistent embrace, a reminder of the world's inexorable shift towards repose. One felt less like an observer and more like a participant, a quiet element absorbed into the deepening quietude. The symphony of the day, with its distant hum of life and the occasional sharp cry of a bird, had receded into a barely audible thrum, a background vibration that underscored the prevailing stillness. What remained were the small, intimate sounds, the barely audible rustle of unseen creatures navigating the undergrowth, a singular, clear note from an evening bird piercing the twilight with fragile beauty, and the almost rhythmic whisper of leaves as an unseen breath stirred the branches above. These were not intrusions, but rather delicate threads woven into the fabric of the quiet, providing texture to its vast expanse. In this gentle communion with the fading light and the rising hush, the usual clamor of thought seemed to ebb away. The insistent questions, the minor anxieties, the persistent echoes of daily pursuits, all began to dissolve, losing their sharp edges, softening into a generalized awareness. There was no need to chase understanding, no urge to grasp or label. Instead, a simple, profound sense of being settled in, like dust motes settling after a long disturbance. Time itself seemed to stretch, no longer a linear progression of ticks and tocks, but an expansive pool, deep and unhurried. The world outside the immediate sphere of perception became less defined, less significant. It was as if the universe had momentarily contracted to this precise point, this confluence of soft light, cool air, and profound quiet. A breath taken here felt deeper, fuller, carrying with it the essence of the moment. The very act of existing felt simplified, distilled to its most fundamental elements. In this unhurried space, one could almost feel the slow, steady pulse of the earth itself, a vast, patient heart beating beneath the quiet surface of things, inviting a surrender to its ancient rhythm. The gentle continuation was not merely a passage of time, but a deepening embrace of the present, promising nothing but the soft, unfolding beauty of what simply was. The quiet hum, then, was not merely an absence of loudness, but a presence of something else entirely. It was a space between notes, the silence that allowed the melody to truly resonate, not just in the ear, but within the very chambers of being. This quietude, once acknowledged, began to unfold, revealing layers previously obscured by the everyday cacophony of thought and task. It was as if a fine dust, imperceptible in its individual particles, had settled over everything, muting the vibrant edges of perception, and now, with this newfound stillness, it had begun to clear. Consider the way the afternoon light, filtered through the shears, altered its character as the sun descended. It did not dim abruptly, nor did it rush. Instead, it performed a gradual, almost imperceptible transformation, shedding its crisp, bright morning clarity for a softer, warmer, more diffuse glow. It painted the wall with a quiet, moving canvas of gold and cream, stretching long shadows from the simplest objects, a forgotten teacup, a book left open on the floor, the gentle curve of a ceramic vase. These shadows, too, were not stark and solid, but soft and feathered at their edges, breathing with the subtle shifts of the day. To truly observe this required a deliberate shedding of haste. It demanded a kind of patient waiting, not for something to happen, but for the happening to reveal itself in its own time. In this gentle vigil, the boundaries between the observer and the observed began to soften. The light was not merely out there, acting upon the wall. It permeated the very air one breathed, warmed the skin, and seemed to settle deep within the chest, a quiet warmth that resonated with the quietude of the room. It was a tangible presence, a silent companion in the unfolding of the moment. This particular quality of light, with its inherent slowness and its capacity to reveal the subtle life within the inert, began to draw the mind inward. If light could shift so gracefully, so profoundly, without any outward show of effort, then what other transformations were occurring constantly beneath the surface of our awareness? What quiet currents were shaping our inner landscape, just as the sun shaped the shadows on the wall? The feeling was not one of searching, but of allowing the self to be porous, to absorb the gentle truths that were always there, waiting to be noticed. There was a peculiar solace in this process. It spoke to a rhythm deeper than the hurried ticking of clocks, a pulse more ancient than human endeavor. It suggested that existence itself was not a series of abrupt events, but a continuous, flowing continuum, infinitely nuanced. Each breath, each fleeting shadow, each whisper of air moving through the room became a tiny, perfect iteration of this grand, slow unfolding. And in recognizing this, the urgency that often gripped the spirit loosened its hold. There was no need to rush, no need to grasp, only to be present, to gently witness the quiet miracle of things simply being. This quiet witness became a form of knowing, not through logic or argument, but through profound, gentle immersion. The morning mist, cool and gossamer thin, still clung to the ancient walls of Chang'an, softening the sharp edges of watchtowers and the distant murmur of waking life. Within the quietude of a secluded courtyard, a young monk named Xuanzang stirred. His robes, faded from years of devotion, rustled softly as he rose, his gaze drawn not to the familiar skyline, but to the unseen horizons far beyond the city's protective embrace. A deep longing, a quiet yearning for true understanding of the Dharma, had taken root within him, blossoming into an unshakable resolve. The scriptures he sought, he knew, lay across vast, unknown lands, whispered in by the faint, distant echoes of the wind. His departure was not heralded by fanfare or grand processions, but by the soft scuff of sandals on the dusty path, a solitary figure slipping away from the familiar embrace of Tang China. He carried little, a few simple necessities, the weight of convictions, and an open heart ready to receive the world's quiet lessons. His first steps westward were into a landscape that quickly shed the comforting green of cultivated fields for the stark beauty of the Gobi. Here, the wind truly became his constant companion, not a roaring gale, but persistent sigh, shaping dunes into gentle undulations, carrying the fine grains of sand in a silent dance. The days unfolded with a serene rhythm, marked by the sun's slow arc across a sky of impossible blue and the hushed arrival of the silvered moonlight. He walked with a steady, unhurried pace, each breath a meditation, each footfall a prayer. The desert nights, crisp and profound, enveloped him in a quietude so deep it felt like the very fabric of existence was breathing around him. He learned to read the subtle shifts in the sand, the faint scent of distant water, carried on a whisper of air, the silent language of the stars that guided him across the boundless expanse. At oases, pockets of vibrant life amidst the golden sea, Xuanzang found fleeting respite. The rustle of date palms, the murmur of spring water trickling into stone basins, the gentle cooing of doves. These were not disruptions but harmonious notes in the symphony of his journey. He would sit beneath the cooling shade, the earthy aroma of damp soil rising around him, and transcribe passages of what scriptures he already possessed, the delicate scratches brush on parchment, a quiet counterpoint to the natural world. He spoke little, listening more to the quiet wisdom of the local inhabitants, the tales of traders, and the deep stillness of the earth itself. Further west, the terrain lifted, ascending toward the formidable Tian Shan Mountains. The air grew thinner, crisper, carrying the sharp scent of pine and the distant, almost imperceptible sound of melting snow. The path here was steeper, the silence more profound, broken only by the gentle chime of a small bell or the distant cry of a mountain bird. He navigated narrow passes and scaled gradual slopes, his breath misting the cool air, his spirit rising with each ascent. Within the high valleys, tucked away from the world's clamor, he found ancient monasteries, their stone walls weathered by centuries, their interior perfumed with the lingering scent of incense and quiet devotion. Here, among fellow seekers, Xuanzang deepened his understanding. He spent weeks, sometimes months, immersed in study, the soft rustle of turning pages the loudest sound in the cool, lamplit scriptoriums. He sought out teachers, absorbing their wisdom not through boisterous debate, but through patient listening and quiet contemplation. The journey was not merely a physical one, but an inward pilgrimage, each step westward bringing him closer to an inner clarity, a quiet enlightenment that resonated with the vast, silent landscapes through which he passed. His quiet journey, undertaken with unwavering devotion, became a testament to the gentle power of knowledge, carried softly on the wind, along the ancient arteries of the Silk Road. The pale light, hesitant at first, had finally committed to its daily unveiling. It streamed through the tall window, not with the harsh brilliance of midday, but with a soft, diffused glow that seemed to filter the very air. It painted the wall with a shifting warmth, slowly banishing the last vestiges of shadow from the corners of the room. A distant, almost imperceptible hum of the world awakening, perhaps a car on a faraway road or the quiet settling of a house, drifted in and out of hearing, a subtle counterpoint to profound stillness that held sway. The ceramic mug, still warm in my hands, offered a comforting weight. The wisps of steam that rose from its dark surface performed a slow, intricate dance before vanishing into the air, ephemeral and beautiful in their brief existence. The scent of roasted beans, deep and earthy, curled upward, an aromatic anchor in the quiet morning. I traced the smooth rim of the mug with my thumb, feeling the gentle warmth seep into my skin, a small, tangible comfort in a world still largely veiled in sleep. Beyond the glass, the garden was awakening with a similar, unhurried grace. Dew still clung to the spiderwebs, transforming invisible threads into shimmering silver constellations, each delicate strand catching the nascent light. The leaves of the ancient oak, heavy with the night's moisture, shifted with a whispery sigh as a gentle breeze, barely a breath, stirred through its branches. A cool breath of air, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and awakening blossoms, drifted through the slightly open window, a refreshing promise of the day to come. There was a profound stillness in these early moments, a sense of the world holding its breath before the day's true symphony began. The dust motes, caught in the sunbeams, seemed to float with an otherworldly slowness, miniature galaxies spiraling in the quiet air, visible only within these luminous pathways. Each tick of the antique clock on the mantelpiece felt less like a marker of elapsed time and more like a gentle pulse, a rhythmic assurance that the present moment was infinite in its quiet offering. It was a time for simple existence, for the quiet unfolding of thought without the clamor of expectation. The worn surface of the wooden table beneath my arm felt smooth, cool, etched with the silent stories of countless mornings just like this one. Even the faint scratching of a squirrel outside, industrious and focused, seemed to blend into the larger tapestry of peace, a tiny counterpoint that only served to highlight the overarching calm. This particular quality of light, so often fleeting, held a promise not of brilliance or urgency, but of gentle warmth, a quiet embrace. It was a solace, a soft invitation to simply be, to let the world turn without the need for immediate engagement, a silent blessing poured into the quiet chambers of the day. As we gently continue this quiet exploration, allow your awareness to settle a little deeper, as if sinking into the softest cushion. There is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, merely an unfolding, a quiet being. You might notice the gentle rhythm you have established, a subtle wave of presence that carries you along. Feel the support beneath you, perhaps the chair, the cushion, the ground itself, holding you with unwavering steadiness. There is no need to adjust or strain. Simply allow yourself to be held, to rest into this moment, exactly as it is. Bring your kind attention once more to breath, not trying to change its pace or depth, but simply noticing its natural expression. Feel the soft movement in your abdomen, a gentle rise on the inhale, a quiet release on the exhale. Perhaps you can sense the cool air entering your nostrils and the slightly warmer air leaving, a subtle dance of temperature with each cycle. Allow your breath to be as it wishes, unhurried, flowing like a quiet stream. With each outward breath, you might imagine a letting go, a gentle release of any lingering tension or thought. Now, gently expand your awareness to include the sensations throughout your body. Feel the quiet weight of your hands resting, perhaps on your lap or by your side. Notice the subtle textures that meet your skin, the fabric of your clothing, the warmth of your own body, the gentle pressure where your skin meets the air. There is no need to analyze or label, just experience these sensations as they are, fleeting and ever-changing. You might become aware of the quiet hum of your own aliveness, a deep, inherent sense of being. Open your awareness to the sounds around you, near and far, without reaching or straining. Simply allow sounds to arrive and pass, like clouds drifting across the sky. The distant murmur of traffic, a quiet creak in a house, the soft hum of your own breath. Each sound simply arises, exists for a moment, and then fades. There is no need to judge them as pleasant or unpleasant, simply to notice their presence and their absence. Each sound, in its own way, is an invitation to deepen your presence in this unfolding moment. Should your mind begin to wander, as minds often do, simply observe the thought as it arises, like a bubble floating to the surface. There is no need to engage with it, no need to follow its story, and certainly no need to scold yourself. With great gentleness, simply acknowledge its presence, and then, as if turning your head slightly, guide your awareness back to the anchor you choose. Perhaps the breath, the feeling of your body, or the quiet sounds around you. Each time you gently return, you strengthen the muscle of your presence, cultivating a deeper sense of inner calm. Rest here, in this spacious awareness, held by the gentle rhythm of your breath and the quiet embrace of the present moment. Allow kindness to pervade your being, a soft understanding for yourself and for all that arises. There is a deep, abiding peace available when we simply allow ourselves to be without effort, without agenda. Let this quiet presence unfold, naturally and softly, as you continue to simply be. The light, once a crisp gold, had begun its slow surrender, bleeding into softer hues of apricot and rose that softened the edges of the room and muted the vibrant colors of the world beyond the pane. There was no urgency in its departure, merely a quiet recession, like a tide easing back on the shore, leaving behind a delicate sheen on everything it touched. A profound stillness settled, not an emptiness, but a richness of presence, a quiet hum that resonated deep within the chest. One could almost feel the air growing denser, cooler, carried with the faint, sweet scent of damp earth and the distant, unseen murmur of leaves turning in a breeze that had yet to reach this sheltered spot. Each breath became a deliberate act, a conscious drawing into the deepening twilight, a gentle release of whatever slight tensions the day might have inadvertently woven into the shoulders or the brow. There was no need to hurry, no place to be, nothing to achieve. Only this unfolding moment, pristine and complete. The mind, too, seemed to mimic the light's gentle retreat, thoughts slowing their eager dance, becoming less like sharp declarations and more like wisps of smoke, curling and dissipating without insistence. Memories might drift to the surface, but they were coated in the same soft light, their edges softened, their impact dulled to a mere impression rather than a vivid recall. A forgotten smile, the echo of a distant voice, a texture felt long ago. They surfaced, lingered for a breath, and then dissolved back into the quiet currents of the present. This was a time for observation without judgment, for feeling without analysis. The faint creak of the old house settling, a sound almost imperceptible in the louder hours, now resonated with a comforting familiarity. The dust motes, caught in the last vestiges of the sun's glow, danced a silent ballet, each tiny particle a world unto itself, suspended in the golden air. It was a dance of infinite smallness, overlooked amidst the clamor of daily life, yet profoundly beautiful in this quiet observance. Even the silence was not absolute. It was punctuated by the soft scratching of a branch against the window, the distant call of an evening bird, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the coming night, yet delivered it with a tender whisper rather than a cry. These were the gentle affirmations of life continuing, of the world breathing around and within, unaffected by the human constructs of time and task. They wove themselves into the fabric of stillness, making it richer, more textured, less of an absence and more of a quiet, living tapestry. To simply be, in this space, at this particular juncture of light and shadow, felt like a deep draught of cool water after a long thirst. It cleansed the mind, soothed the spirit, and grounded the body in a way that busy motion never could. There was a sense of profound acceptance in this quietude, an understanding that all things passed, and in their passing, left behind a new, equally beautiful state. The day surrendered to night, the light to shadow, the noise to peace. And in the surrender, there was only grace. The Silk Road, in its vastness, was not solely a path of bustling caravans and vibrant markets. It was also a tapestry woven with faint, almost invisible threads, detours and forgotten trails that snaked into the quietude of the mountains or across the vast, dreaming plains. Along these less trodden ways, where the wind carried little but the sigh of eternity, echoes of moments long past sometimes lingered, not as clear pronouncements, but as soft, unanswerable murmurs. One such whisper belongs to the high past known to a few, and then fewer as the silent ascent. It was never a primary artery, too rugged, too capricious in his moods, demanding too much of beasts and men. Only those seeking solitude, or perhaps lost of their true bearing, ever drifted into its stony embrace. For generations, the sparse mountain folk and the occasional hardy shepherd would tell quiet tales of finding peculiar marks etched not by nature, but by some long-forgotten hand. Scattered across miles of the pass's desolate, wind-scour hollows, often nestled near the thin trickle of a melting snow spring, one might stumble upon them. These were not grand monuments, nor the remains of fortifications or settlements. They were merely arrangements of stone, smooth, dark river stones, plucked from distant beds and carried to these heights, were laid with startling precision. Each site featured a concentric pattern of these dark, water-worn ovals, meticulously placed. At the very heart of these circles, always, stood a single, taller stone, naturally pointed, never carved, seeming to reach up from the earth like a silent sentinel. There were dozens of them, perhaps more, secreted away in the hidden folds of the silent ascent. Some were small, barely a dozen paces across, while others stretched wider, their rings radiating out like ripples in a still pool. The patterns were remarkably consistent in their design, suggesting a shared intent, a common language spoken only in stone. Yet, no two arrangements were exactly alike in size or the precise number of rings. What little was known about them only deepened the quiet wonder. No pottery shards were ever found near these circles, no tools, no traces of fires, no bone fragments that might speak a long occupation or specific rituals. They simply were, as if the stones themselves had chosen their places, guided by an invisible hand, then settled into a deep, ageless slumber. No known script adorned them, no recognizable symbols linked them to any great empire or nomadic tribe whose histories whispered to the Silk Road. They seemed to exist outside the known currents of time, distinct and stubbornly anonymous. One might ponder, in the hush of the mountain twilight, what quiet purpose drew beings to these lonely, wind-swept places. Were they markers for stars long dimmed? Altars to a forgotten god of the high peaks? Perhaps points of contemplation, where silent figures knelt, seeking solace or revelation in the vast indifference of the world? Or merely the whimsical, painstaking work of travelers, pausing to leave behind a small, enduring testament to their journey, a silent word breathed into the heart of the mountains? The silent ascent keeps its secrets close. The stones remain, nestled among the lichen and the sparse mountain grasses, patiently enduring the long passage of seasons. The wind, which once might have carried the soft murmurs of their creators, now only sings its ancient, unanswering song. And the mystery lingers, a faint echo in the grand, unfolding narrative of the Silk Road, forever inviting a sleepy curiosity that finds no clear answer, only the beauty of what remains unspoken. The quality of light, even in its quietude, held a particular weight that morning, a soft, diffused presence that seemed to gather in the corners of the room before stretching itself languidly across the polished floorboards. It was not the crisp, demanding clarity of full sun, nor the muted, melancholic gray of a perpetually overcast sky. Instead, it possessed a nuanced tenderness, as if the dawn itself had unfolded with an unhurried grace, holding its breath just long enough for the world to awaken at its own measured pace. Each dust mote, caught in the slow dance of the air, became a tiny, transient star, winking out of existence as it drifted through the ethereal shafts. There was a hum, barely perceptible, that seemed to emanate from the stillness itself, a deep, resonant whisper that spoke of the enduring silence beyond the immediate sounds. It was the soft sigh of the house settling into its morning, the distant, almost imagined rustle of leaves beyond the window, or perhaps the quiet stirrings of one's own heart finding its rhythm in the nascent day. The air, though cool with the lingering chill of the night, carried with it the faint, sweet promise of an approaching warmth, a subtle perfume of damp earth and awakening flora that seeped through the ever so slightly ajar window pane. To simply breathe it in, deeply and slowly, felt like an act of profound gratitude. Moving through the space was an exercise in mindful slowness, each step taken with an awareness of the floor beneath, the textures encountered by a hand brushing against a curtain, the gentle pressure of a finger tracing the cool surface of a ceramic mug. There was no urgency in the day's dawning, no pressing appointment or clamoring demand. The morning offered itself as a vast, empty canvas, inviting only a quiet presence, a gentle observation of the small, unfolding details that often escape notice in the hurried march of time. The simple ritual of boiling water for tea, the whisper of steam rising, the delicate clink of a spoon against porcelain. Each sound seemed amplified in its solitary beauty. From the window, the garden presented itself as a tapestry of greens and muted browns, still damp with the night's gentle condensation. Droplets clung to the tips of blades of grass, trembling like tiny, perfect jewels, reflecting the pale sky in miniature. A single robin, bold and self-possessed, hopped across the lawn, its sharp gaze fixed on some unseen promise in the dew-kissed earth. Its movements were precise, economical, a small ballet of instinct and purpose against a backdrop of quiet, growing light. The scene, so utterly simple, held a profound sense of continuity, a quiet affirmation of life's persistent, beautiful cycle. Such moments, unburdened by expectation or external noise, held a rare kind of peace. They were like deep, still pools in the midst of a rushing stream, offering a mirror for the soul to gaze into its own depths without distraction. There was a subtle wisdom to be gleaned from the way the light shifted, from the patient unfurling a new day, a quiet teaching in the delicate interplay of shadow and illumination. It was a reminder that true richness often lay not in accumulation or grandiosity, but in the spaciousness found within the small, the ordinary, the wonderfully gentle unfolding of each precious moment. And in that unfolding, a quiet completeness could be found. And so the quiet deepens, not a silence imposed, but one invited, like a soft guest stepping over a threshold. It is in this settled space that the subtle shifts begin to reveal themselves, not with sudden flourish, but with the gentle unfolding of a blossom in the morning light. The mind, once a restless current, now finds its own eddies and pools, reflecting the sky above with an ever-increasing clarity. This settling is a delicate art, a letting go rather than a grasping, allowing the inner landscape to come into focus without the need for immediate analysis. This is not a state to be grasped or held, but rather one to be allowed. Each breath becomes a small anchor, drawing one closer to the simple fact of being, to the very pulse of existence that flows through every living thing. There is no need for grand pronouncements, no urgency to label or categorize what arises. Instead, there is merely the quiet acknowledgement, a soft nod to the passing moment, whether it carries a faint echo of a distant thought or the warm sensation of the air upon the skin. This is a humble stance, this receptive awareness, opening the door to perceptions that might otherwise remain unseen, unheard beneath the din of everyday life. Consider how the light itself behaves in such a space. It does not demand attention, but rather diffuses, softens, painting the familiar with new, delicate hues. A shadow, once a mere absence of light, now becomes an intricate dance of form and suggestion, revealing contours previously unnoticed. The edges of things blur, not into confusion, but into a more harmonious whole, revealing the interconnectedness that underlies all separate appearances. It is as if the very fabric of perception loosens, allowing a deeper, more fluid understanding to seep in, not as intellectual knowledge, but as an embodied sense of unity. The air itself seems to hum with a quiet energy, a living presence resonating with one's own inner stillness. There is a natural rhythm to this unfolding, akin to the slow turning of the earth, or the imperceptible growth of a tree. Patience becomes not a virtue to be cultivated, but an intrinsic quality of the moment itself, a recognition that true unfolding happens in its own time. There is no hurry to arrive, for the arrival is in the journey, in the very act of gentle observation, the quiet attention given to each emerging detail. Each new insight, each subtle release, arises organically, unforced, like a quiet sigh of recognition, a gentle ripple across a perfectly still pond. The usual clamor of inner dialogue begins to recede, not vanishing entirely, perhaps, but softening into a distant hum. One notices the space between thoughts, the silent interval where something else resides, a boundless spaciousness, a reservoir of calm that was always there, merely obscured by the busy currents of the mind. It is in this spaciousness that a profound sense of ease can settle, a comfort that does not depend on external circumstances, but arises from within like a wellspring, deep and inexhaustible. This is a quiet assurance that, Even amidst complexities, a core tranquility remains untouched. This gentle presence extends beyond the self. It begins to touch the perception of others, of the world beyond the immediate confines of one's own skin. The sharpness of judgment softens, replaced by a quiet empathy, a recognition of shared vulnerability, shared striving. The rustle of leaves outside the window, the distant drone of a car, even the faint murmur of human activity, all become part of a larger symphony, neither good nor bad, simply present, simply unfolding. There is a sense of belonging, a quiet participation in the vast, intricate tapestry of life. To sustain this, one needs no arduous effort, no strenuous discipline. It is more about a subtle leaning into the moment, a soft inclination towards what is. It is about allowing the mind to rest, to cease its incessant striving, and to simply be. And in this simple being, a quiet clarity emerges, not a clarity that asserts, but one that simply is. It is a clarity of water that is settled, allowing all the suspended particles to drift down, revealing the depths beneath. This process is its own reward, a gentle returning to a state of quiet grace, where everything simply is exactly as it needs to be, in this very moment. The subtle hum of life, the soft whisper of the present, becomes the most profound sound of all. Segment 3.4. The true art of slowing, one begins to discover, is not merely about reducing the pace of one's external actions, but rather an invitation into a different quality of presence. It is a conscious decision to unfurl the tightly clenched fist of ambition and urgency, allowing the fingers of perception to gently loosen and explore the textures of the immediate moment. We are so often caught in the forward thrust, propelled by the next task, the next notification, the next desire, that a profound richness of the now eludes us, like a whisper carried away by a brisk wind. To truly embrace this segment, then, is to learn how to cup one's ear to that whisper. Consider the early light of morning, before the world has fully roused itself from its slumber. There is a specific kind of stillness that permeates these hours, a fragile peace that can easily be shattered by the abrupt clang of an alarm or the immediate grab for a device. Instead, imagine allowing the dawn to seep in gradually. Perhaps the first sign is a faint brightening behind closed eyelids, a warmth that slowly spreads across the face. Then, the softest chorus of distant bird song, tentative at first, then gaining confidence as the sky lightens to a pale, luminous gray. There is no urgency in these sounds, no demand. They are simply there, a gentle unveiling of the day. One's breath, too, can mirror this quiet unfolding, deepening and lengthening without conscious effort, a natural rhythm finding its own unhurried tempo. This deliberate absence of haste cultivates a fertile ground for deeper awareness. When the mind is not constantly racing toward an imagined future or rehashing a lamented past, it finds itself anchored, however fleetingly, in the quiet reality of the present. The subtle scent of brewing tea might then become an event in itself, complex and inviting, rather than a mere precursor to the first sip. The simple act of holding a warm mug can transform from a functional gesture into a moment of pure, sensory delight, the heat radiating through the ceramic, warming the palms, a quiet comfort. These are not grand gestures, nor do they require extraordinary circumstances. They are the small, often overlooked pearls scattered throughout the everyday, awaiting only a softened gaze and an open heart to be discovered. The beauty of this gentle descent into the present is its cumulative effect. Each tiny moment savored, each breath acknowledged, each subtle shift in light or sound observed without judgment, weaves itself into a tapestry of tranquil awareness. The rush of time, so often perceived as an unyielding torrent, begins to flow a more languid current, allowing for eddies and pools where thought can linger, where feelings can be gently acknowledged without being swept away. There is a grace in deliberate motion, a quiet strength in the unhurried hand, the steady gaze, the mind that chooses not to leap but to settle. It is in these unpressured moments that clarity often emerges, not through forceful intellectual effort, but through a peaceful widening of perspective. The solutions to perplexing problems, the insights into complex emotions, or simply a profound sense of well-being often arrive not when sought with urgency, but when the mind is allowed to drift in a quiet, receptive state. This is a profound gift of this particular segment. The realization that true progress is not always measured by speed or volume, but by the depth of one's engagement with the unfolding now, a gentle, sustained presence that brings both peace and understanding. Segment 4.1. While the wind carried dust and the scent of distant mountains across the sun-baked routes, bearing the quiet journeys of merchants and scholars, another existence unfolded in hushed, perfumed courtyards far removed from the grit of travel. Here, silence was not merely an absence of sound, but a deliberate curation, a luxurious layer woven into the very fabric of life. Within the cool, shaded chambers of a grand villa nestled amongst groves of cypress and manicured gardens, the Lady Anya often sat, her silk robes pooling like melted jewel tones around her on cushions stuffed with down. The light that reached her was filtered through intricate lattice screens, painting dappled patterns across the polished jade floor, a floor that had known no traveler's boot, only the whisper of soft slippers. Her days lacked the compelling urgency of the road, replaced instead by a tranquil rhythm of gentle pursuits. A delicate porcelain cup, impossibly thin and cool against her fingertips, held tea made from leaves that had journeyed over deserts and seas, each precious fragment arriving not as sustenance, but as a ritual. The faint, sweet aroma of cinnamon, too, wafted from a nearby burner, a spice that had traveled thousands of li to offer a moment's fleeting comfort, its arduous passage entirely unknown to her. The objects that furnished her world were not merely tools, but declarations. A lacquered screen depicting a serene mountain landscape, crafted in distant lands, then meticulously transported, provided a vista she would never experience firsthand. Scrolls unfurled on a low table held poems of journey and hardship, yet they were read in an air-conditioned room, the only breeze generated by the slow, rhythmic fanning of an attendant. The rough hands that had shaped the clay of a vase, the callous feet that had carried the raw silk across treacherous passes, the weary eyes that had gazed upon vast, indifferent skies, these realities were utterly abstracted, softened into an exquisite beauty that was simply there for her appreciation. Her morning ablutions involved oils poured from glazed amphorae, their fragrant contents having traversed continents in sealed containers. Her food, prepared by unseen cooks, arrived on trays of polished wood. Each dish a miniature landscape of carefully arranged flavors, often incorporating rare fruits whose very existence was dependent on the long, tenuous threads of trade. The greatest effort expended by Lady Anya herself might be the precise placement of a single pearl hairpin into her artfully coiled hair, or the measured strokes of a calligraphy brush across a sheet of fine paper. The world beyond the villa's walls was largely an elegant abstraction, understood primarily through the artifact it yielded and the hushed reports of trusted agents. The vibrant chaos of a marketplace, the stark beauty of a desert sunrise, the shared laughter around a roadside fire, these were not her experiences. Her journey was inward, a quiet navigation of carefully constructed realities, where every comfort was delivered, every want anticipated, and the raw, unvarnished truth of the Silk Road was refined into the delicate perfection of a porcelain cup. The late afternoon light, now mellowed to a soft butter gold, began its slow journey across the room, tracing new patterns on familiar surfaces. There was a hush that deepened with each passing minute, a gentle softening of the world outside, as if the very air had decided to hold its breath in quiet contemplation. Dust motes, caught in the radiant beams, danced in miniature galaxies, visible only in these fleeting, sacred moments of specific illumination. It was a dance without sound, a silent ballet of particulate, unfolding against the backdrop of an almost perfect stillness. The quality of this quiet was not empty or hollow. Rather, it felt full, rich with the absence of demand, a space allowing thoughts to drift like clouds on a summer breeze, unhurried and unburdened. The warmth of the sunbeam reached the polished surface of the old wooden table, causing the grain to stand out in intricate detail, like a secret map etched by time. Each whirl had not told a silent story of growth and patient endurance, absorbing the golden light and reflecting it back with a subdued glow. There was no urgency in this reflection, no sharp glare, just a diffused radiance that spoke of contentment. A single small ceramic cup, forgotten for a while, sat near the edge of the light's embrace, its glazed surface catching a sliver of the warmth, making its faint patterns ripple with an imagined shimmer. To observe it, really observe it, was to feel a subtle shift within, a settling of the hurried edges of the day. This careful observation extended beyond the immediate reach of the light, seeping into the shadows that now grew long and indistinct in the corners. They were not shadows of dread, but of comfort, deep and velvety, inviting a sense of enclosure and repose. The air itself seemed to have a faint, almost imperceptible scent, perhaps of old paper, perhaps of the fading warmth of the day, or simply the clean, neutral scent of a space at peace. It was a scent that brought no strong memories, but rather a quiet assurance, a gentle confirmation of presence, of being right here, right now, in this particular precious stretch of time. There was a profound sense of permission in this quietude. Permission to simply exist without striving, without the clamor of expectation or the press of the next task. The mind, often a restless wanderer, found a gentle mooring in the steady flow of the light, in the steadfast silence that wrapped around everything like a soft shawl. It was in moments like these that the small anxieties, usually buzzing at the periphery, seemed to dissipate, melting away into the broader, calmer current of the present. A quiet breath deepened, a gentle relaxation spread to the shoulders, a feeling of being unfurled, like a tightly wound scroll slowly unrolling to reveal its delicate artistry. Outside, a faint, distant hum of a single car passing might momentarily brush against the edge of this quiet, but it was quickly absorbed, leaving the stillness even more pronounced in its wake. A leaf, brown and crisp, might detach itself from a nearby branch and spiral down to the earth with the softest rustle, a sound almost imagined. These were not intrusions, but rather tiny affirmations of the world's quiet continuance, gentle reminders that life moved on, even in the suspended calm, but at a pace so considered it barely disturbed the prevailing peace. This particular segment of the day, unhurried and unmarked by significant events, held a distinct beauty in its very lack of drama. It was the beauty of simple being, of passive reception, of allowing the world to unfold its quiet magic without interference. There was no need to grasp at it, no need to define it or hurry its passing. It simply was a generous gift of time unburdened by purpose beyond its own gentle unfolding. And in this acceptance, in this allowing, resided a deeply restorative power, a quiet replenishing of the spirit that felt more profound than any active pursuit. The light continued its slow retreat, the butter gold deepening into shades of amber, then a soft, muted rose, promising the approach of evening, but still holding on to its warmth. The room remained steeped in its gentle embrace, a sanctuary where time seemed less a linear progression and more a wide, calm pool, reflecting the quiet, changing hues of the sky. The peace that had settled and lingered, a quiet companion ready to accompany the gentle transition into the soft dimness of twilight. The late afternoon light, now mellowed to a soft butter gold, began its slow journey across the room, tracing new patterns on familiar surfaces. There was a hush that deepened with each passing minute, a gentle softening of the world outside, as if the very air had decided to hold its breath in quiet contemplation. Dust motes, caught in the radiant beams, danced in miniature galaxies, visible only in these fleeting, sacred moments of specific illumination. It was a dance without sound, a silent ballet at articulate, unfolding against the backdrop of an almost perfect stillness. The quality of this quiet was not empty or hollow. Rather, it felt full, rich with the absence of demand, a space allowing thoughts to drift like clouds on a summer breeze, unhurried and unburdened. The warmth of the sunbeam reached the polished surface of the old wooden table, causing the grain to stand out in intricate detail, like a secret map etched by time. Each whirl had not told a silent story of growth and patient endurance, absorbing the golden light and reflecting it back with a subdued glow. There was no urgency in this reflection, no sharp glare, just a diffused radiance that spoke of contentment. A single small ceramic cup, forgotten for a while, sat near the edge of the light's embrace, its glazed surface catching a sliver of the warmth, making its faint patterns ripple with an imagined shimmer. To observe it, really observe it, was to feel a subtle shift within, a settling of the hurried edges of the day. This careful observation extended beyond the immediate reach of the light, seeping into the shadows that now grew long and indistinct in the corners. They were not shadows of dread, but of comfort, deep and velvety, inviting a sense of enclosure and repose. The air itself seemed to have a faint, almost imperceptible scent, perhaps of old paper, perhaps of the fading warmth of the day, or simply the clean, neutral scent of a space at peace. It was a scent that brought no strong memories, but rather a quiet assurance, a gentle confirmation of presence, of being right here, right now, in this particular precious stretch of time. There was a profound sense of permission in this quietude. Permission to simply exist without striving, without the clamor of expectation or the press of the next task. The mind, often a restless wanderer, found a gentle mooring in the steady flow of the light, in the steadfast silence that wrapped around everything like a soft shawl. It was in moments like these that the small anxieties, usually buzzing at the periphery, seemed to dissipate, melting away into the broader, calmer current of the present. A quiet breath deepened, a gentle relaxation spread to the shoulders, a feeling of being unfurled, like a tightly wound scroll slowly unrolling to reveal its delicate artistry. Outside, a faint, distant hum of a single car passing might momentarily brush against the edge of this quiet, but it was quickly absorbed, leaving the stillness even more pronounced in its wake. A leaf, brown and crisp, might detach itself from a nearby branch and spiral down to the earth with the softest rustle, a sound almost imagined. These were not intrusions, but rather tiny affirmations of the world's quiet continuance, gentle reminders that life moved on, even in the suspended calm, but at a pace so considered it barely disturbed the prevailing peace. This particular segment of the day, unhurried and unmarked by significant events, held a distinct beauty in its very lack of drama. It was the beauty of simple being, of passive reception, of allowing the world to unfold its quiet magic without interference. There was no need to grasp at it, no need to define it or hurry its passing. It simply was a generous gift of time unburdened by purpose beyond its own gentle unfolding. And in this acceptance, in this allowing, resided a deeply restorative power, a quiet replenishing of the spirit that felt more profound than any active pursuit. The light continued its slow retreat, the butter gold deepening into shades of amber, then a soft, muted rose, promising the approach of evening, but still holding on to its warmth. The room remained steeped in its gentle embrace, a sanctuary where time seemed less a linear progression and more a wide, calm pool, reflecting the quiet, changing hues of the sky. The peace that had settled and lingered, a quiet companion ready to accompany the gentle transition into the soft dimness of twilight. The soft decline of the day continued its patient surrender, a gradual release of light from the sky's vast hold. Each passing minute seemed to stretch, unhurried, as if time itself had decided to recline and simply observe. The golden hues that had painted the western window earlier had now softened to a pearlescent glow, tinged with lavender and a faint, hopeful rose. Shadows, once sharp and distinct, began to blur at their edges, merging into the deeper pools of dusk that gathered beneath furniture and in the quiet corners of the room. It was a visual hush, a quiet dimming that coaxed the world into a more reflective state. The air, too, felt different. The gentle warmth of the afternoon, the sort that encouraged an expansive ease, had begun to recede, replaced by a subtle coolness that suggested the approaching evening. It was not a chilling cold, but a refreshing touch, a whispered promise of night stillness. One could feel it shift, a barely perceptible current against the skin, carry with it the faint, earthy scent of damp soil from the garden outside, mingled with the last lingering warmth from sun-baked stone. This quiet transition encouraged a similar cooling within, a slowing of the internal pulse, an invitation to simply be. Sounds, which had earlier been a tapestry of distant traffic hum and the occasional chirp of a late-singing bird, seemed to withdraw, retreating into the background until they were barely whispers. The world outside the window, once a lively tableau, was now becoming a series of muted shapes, indistinct and dreamlike. The rustle of leaves on the oak tree just beyond the glass, a sound that during the day could be a playful chatter, now seemed a solemn, almost reverent sigh. It was as if the natural world was preparing its own quiet repose, each element contributing to a growing sense of serene calm. There was a peculiar beauty in this fading, a melancholic grace that did not sadden, but rather offer profound sense of peace. It was the beauty of transition, of letting go, of making space for what was yet to come. The day's tasks, the small worries and fleeting joys, all seemed to dissolve into this gentle twilight, becoming less urgent, less defined. There was only the present moment, unfolding with a languid grace that held no demands, only an offer of quietude. One might find themselves drawn to the window, not to see anything specific, but simply to witness this unhurried transformation. The sky, a canvas of deepening blues and purples, began to reveal the first hesitant pinpricks of light, tiny distant stars emerging from a vastness. Each one seemed to appear with a deliberate slowness, a quiet declaration of its enduring presence. They were not sudden bursts, but rather the gentle brightening of points that had always been there, merely hidden by the day's brighter light. The room itself seemed to absorb the twilight, becoming a softer, more intimate space. Objects lost their sharp edges, gaining a gentle blur that hinted at forgotten stories. A book lay open on the side table, its pages now too dim to read, its words waiting patiently for the return of light or the flick of a lamp. A half-empty teacup, still radiating a faint warmth, felt like a small anchor in the gathering quiet, a testament to a moment enjoyed and extended. It was in these moments of soft descent, when the boundary between the day's activity and night's profound stillness became porous, that one could truly feel the rhythm of existence. Not the frantic beat of human endeavor, but the deeper, slower pulse of the world turning, the breath of the planet. This was an ending, but a gentle pivot, a turning of the page to a fresh, unwritten chapter of quiet contemplation and restful anticipation. The world was settling, and so, too, was the soul. The last tendrils of afternoon light stretched across the polished floorboards, their warmth long since faded into a cool, silver sheen. A hush had settled, deep and encompassing, as if the very air decided to hold its breath. Outside, the world was preparing for its gentle slumber, a symphony of slowing rhythms that whispered rather than declared. From where one sat, the window offered a perfect canvas for this quiet unfolding. The oak trees, ancient sentinels, stirred only occasionally, their leaves rustling with a dry, papery sound that was more felt than heard. Each small movement seemed deliberate, a slow, unhurried dance in the deepening twilight. The breeze, when it came, was not a bluster, but a soft, almost imperceptible caress against the glass, carried with it the faint, sweet scent of damp earth and distant, late-blooming honeysuckle. Time, in this space, seemed to liquefy, dissolving the sharp edges of the day's concerns. There was no urgency, no pressing need for action or decision. Merely being in this moment was enough. The mind drifted, not with purpose, but like a loose feather caught on an updraft, floating idly, observing without judgment. Thoughts surfaced, soft and round, then sank again, leaving no ripple on the calm surface of consciousness. It was a rare and precious state, a quietude that invited the soul to unfurl, to stretch out its cramped limbs and breathe freely. One might notice the way the shadows lengthened, transforming familiar objects into intriguing new silhouettes. The curve of a ceramic pot on the sill, previously unremarkable, now held a deep, enigmatic presence against a fading glow. The intricate pattern of a woven rug, usually overlooked, became a landscape of subtle textures and varying densities under the dimming light. Every detail, however small, seemed to gain a new significance, not because it was profound, but because it was simply there, existing in this shared stillness. A tiny moth, drawn by some unseen force, fluttered briefly against the pane, a soft, almost imperceptible tap-tap, before retreating back into gathering gloom. Its brief, ephemeral dance was a poignant reminder of life's delicate fragility, yet it did not disturb the peace. Instead, it folded seamlessly into the tapestry of the evening, another thread woven into the fabric of quiet. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the distinct freshness of the approaching night. Soon, the first stars would prick the darkening sky, tiny pinpricks of light in the vast, inky expanse. There was a quiet anticipation in this waiting, not an impatient one, but a gentle readiness, an acceptance of the inevitable turning of the world. One felt a part of it, this grand, slow cycle, connected to the rhythm of the trees, the earth, and the distant, unseen heavens. The very act of breathing felt more profound, each inhale a drawing of the pervasive calm, each exhale a release of any lingering tension. To simply sit, to observe, to feel the quiet pulse of existence, was a profound luxury in a world that often demanded constant engagement. Here, there was only the slow, gentle progression of twilight into night, a silent benediction upon all that rested within its embrace. The the boundaries between self and surroundings blurred, leaving only a sense of profound, tranquil presence. And as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered completely to the encroaching darkness, a deep sense of contentment settled, a soft blanket against the coming coolness of the night. We've journeyed together tonight, haven't we? A slow drift across the world's ancient arteries. Those silent pathways were more than just silk or spice traveled. Here, humanity itself moved, in hushed conversations and shared glances, weaving a tapestry of understanding across vast, echoing landscapes. How much has changed since then? The lumbering caravans of old have given way to vessels of steel, skimming oceans or roaring across land. The gentle creak of a wagon wheel replaced by the electric hum of progress. Yet, beneath the hum, don't you still hear the whisper of those ancient winds? Don't you feel the same enduring pulse of connection, even in our hurried world? For all the speed we've gained, the core of our journey remains. The quiet wonder of vast distances, the shared moments that bridge cultures, the silent humanity that binds us. These are timeless. Like a river shifting its course but never forgetting its source, we float onward, carrying echoes of the past within us. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment with me. I hope you felt the ancient dust under your feet and the vast, open sky above. If you enjoyed our journey, please consider liking this story, subscribing to the channel for more tales, and perhaps leaving a comment to share your own reflections. It means the world. Now, as the world outside settles into its own gentle rhythm, I wish you peace. Rest well, and may your dreams drift as gently as those ancient travelers across the landscapes of your mind. Until next time,